example would be Irving Berlin, who was, arguably one of the most successful songwriters in history. But
Yes.
I guess the guy couldn't carry a tune in a bucket himself,
Mm-hmm.
and he really was a terrible piano player to the point where he had to hire someone to come in. And the story I heard is he only played the black keys.
Right.
But here's a guy who wrote a song like White Christmas.
Right.
God Bless America, things like that
Still
are
going
standards
strong.
of standards.
Right.
But he was definitely not a performer.
Besides yourself, who is your favorite writer?
Well, and that to me is a hard question to answer, part of which is the nature of me, which I'm someone, if I go to a all-you-can-eat buffet, I have a lot of trouble because I like most things that are there. So,
Okay.
and that's kind of, I guess, symptomatic of my life, is there are a lot of people I like.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess if I'm going to get pinned down, which is generally hard to do, and you can ask my wife about that, but that's a whole different topic. But if I was to get pinned down, I'll probably list someone who you've never heard of, and his name's David M. Bailey.
Okay.
And David is someone I felt kind of a deep kinship with, and I accidentally heard him on a radio program in the late 90s, maybe 2000. And he was someone who had this kind of amazing story in that he was a guy who grew up playing some music. His father was a Presbyterian theologian. He grew up in Lebanon and played some music, right? Well, then he got serious, went through college, graduated, started working in corporate America. One day he wakes up, he's had some tremendous pain. He's in a hospital, and they say, Mr. Bailey, you've got a grade 4 brain tumor, and you should get ready for the end.
Wow.
And he said, well, what are the odds? They said, well, maybe 1 out of 100. And he said, well, I guess someone's got to be the one. So over the next 12 and a half years, he put out 23 CDs.
Wow.
And he was, I guess if I was to describe him, I'd say he was a warrior of hope. I mean, his music was he was supposed to die in 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, after 12 and a half years, it did come back, catch up with him.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, the sort of things he said were just, it was a positive message. And one of my, I guess, honors in life was I got to open for him one time.
Wow.
And that was before it had come back. He went over 10 years clean. And so when he got sick, I said, I know you're not able to get out, but let me see if I can learn one of your songs. So I learned one called One More Day, his, that talks about all of us have today. Whatever's going on, you got today, you ought to make the most of that day.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, even though you're not out there playing, I'm going to play that when I go out, people will hear your message. And ever since I've been doing that. And like I say, that's a guy who I think made a difference.
How do you think songwriting has changed, like in the last 5 to 10 years, like since the turn of the century?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? How do you think things are different for us now as writers than they were in the 20th century?
Well, obviously the connected world we're in changes things, and I think to some extent that affects people like coming to actual meetings like the Chicago Songwriters Collective. People figure, well, I can do everything in the world online. I don't need to leave. And I don't think that that's necessarily the right approach, because there's something about being face-to-face and just direct interaction with people. But, certainly now as a songwriter, I know people who write a lyric, put it up on Twitter, here's it, what do you think of this? And people respond, then they write that, and, you can write that way. You can try to live in the Facebook world for stuff, but maybe I'm old-fashioned that way, but, I think somewhere along the line you need to actually see people and, be in front of an audience and see, okay, does anybody get what I'm saying?
So we're dealing with a lot of digital or internet connectivity,
Right.
which is cool, but you're saying it's the organic feeling of being there, the human energy, the energy field that we create,
Right.
the dynamic of being able to perform your music off of a live audience.
Yeah.
That is some of your most valuable feedback.
Right. Well, and, probably, there's no high, I guess, in some sense, like being in front of an audience who's really with you.
That's true.
I mean, probably my favorite story on that, I mean, I had a couple, but probably the most interesting one is I got to play in maximum security at Cook County Jail once.
Really?
I did.
Wow.
And
that had to be interesting.
It was. I mean, first to get in, you literally had to make a list of, I'm bringing in 6 extra guitar strings. I mean, it was every single thing. And you walk in, you take off your right.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're an anonymous person, and then the doors close behind you.
Right.
And I got in through a group that I'm involved with called Chicagoland Prison Outreach.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was playing to a group of maybe 200 guys. I was with 2 other songwriters from the collective, someone who was co-president with me for a period of time, and then the person who was president before me. And we went in, and I've never had an audience just like connect like those guys did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was one of those things like we were just so together. I mean, it was a great experience.
Funnily enough, I had a similar experience when I was in college. We went and sang. We did prison ministry with the gospel choir I was with. It was exactly what you said.
Right.
They were totally with us from start to finish, and it was just incredible. And they seemed to be really moved by what we were saying. And you're right. It was a life-changing experience for me as well. Now, tell me, what other songwriting organizations are you a part of besides the Chicago Collective?
Okay, well, I'm a member of ASCAP as a performing rights organization.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm a member of the National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences, NARIS, aka the Grammys.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good organization. I certainly would encourage other songwriters to be part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that, I mean, I've gone out 3 times to LA to see the Grammys live, which that's just a great experience to do. But the local chapter here in Chicago certainly is worth being part of.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, just Thursday night, I was at one of their functions that was, once again, a very amazing story of a songwriter. If you've heard of a movie that's out now called Searching for Sugar Man.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, it's about this guy Rodriguez who, unbeknownst to him, for 30 years was like one of the top-selling artists in South Africa during the apartheid era.
Mm-hmm.
But he released these 2 albums in 70, 71. They were complete flops. He disappears from music, working manual labor for 30 years. Some guys from South Africa track him down, and he was as big as the Beatles sales-wise there. I mean, he was huge, and he was actually very much a part, his music was much a part of ending apartheid. And it's an amazing story. This guy never knew any of this. And over there, they didn't know that the rest of the world didn't think this guy was a superstar either. Well, he finally gets tracked down, and, he goes back to South Africa, does these concerts, sold out venues, 25,000. Neat story. And then the Grammy people actually had him there, and we got to do a Q&A with him afterwards. I think a big part of music is being connected, knowing people. Probably, like on my bagpipe album, I worked with a guy who's a cellist. I got this crazy idea also, aside from hip-hop bagpipe, to do a cello bagpipe collaboration. So I worked with a guy I met one night. I met him at a Just Plain Folks, which was another music organization.
Mm-hmm.
They did a showcase, and he came from New York here to play 1 song 2 nights with Just Plain Folks. And this guy, he was someone who does classical compositions that are played around the world. We also play solid body cello, doing like Jimi Hendrix on it. So anyway, we kept up over the years, but there's a connection I made, and he became part of something I did.
Wow. That's
So
great.
you just don't know where the people you meet take you.
Blase blue da bleep blop blue.